The fire from the crash shuttle burned bright against the purple sky of Valora Prime. Park Do-hyun pulled himself from the wreckage, his body screaming with pain. Blood ran down his face from a cut on his forehead. His left arm hung at a bad angle. But he was alive. He looked around at the alien forest. Strange trees with silver leaves surrounded him. The air smelled sweet, almost like flowers, but there was something else underneath. Something that made his stomach turn. This was enemy territory. Korath territory. Do-hyun had been a combat medic for 8 years. He had saved hundreds of lives on dozens of planets. He had watched friends die in his arms. He had learned to stay calm when everything around him was chaos. But standing alone on an enemy world, with no weapons and no way to call for help, even he felt fear creeping into his heart. He checked his medical bag. It had survived the crash. Inside were his tools, his medicines, and the small data chip that contained his wife's research. Sujin had been dead for 3 years now, killed in a Korath attack on a research station. But her work lived on in that chip, stored in the neural implant behind his ear. Sometimes, when he closed his eyes, he could still hear her voice explaining her discoveries about alien biology. The sound of movement made him freeze. Through the silver trees, he saw them coming. Korath soldiers. They were tall, almost 2 meters, with hard shells covering their bodies like armor. Their eyes were large and black, showing no emotion. They carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy. Do-hyun did not run. There was nowhere to go. He raised his hands slowly and waited. The soldiers surrounded him. One of them, larger than the others, stepped forward and looked at him with disgust. To the Korath, humans were primitive creatures. Violent animals who had somehow learned to build ships and travel between stars. The war between their species had lasted for 40 years, and hatred ran deep on both sides. The large soldier spoke in the Korath language. Do-hyun did not understand the words, but he understood the meaning when the soldier raised his weapon. This was an execution, but then another soldier noticed something. He pointed at the Red Cross symbol on Do-hyun's uniform, the symbol of a healer. The soldiers spoke quickly among themselves. The large one lowered his weapon, looking unhappy. Instead of killing Do-hyun, they bound his hands and forced him to march. They walked for hours through the alien forest. Do-hyun's legs ached and his injured arm throbbed with every step. But he kept moving. He had survived worse than this. Finally, they reached the Korath city. It was unlike anything Do-hyun had ever seen. The buildings rose from the ground like giant hives, made of something that looked like stone but glowed faintly from within. Thousands of Korath moved through the streets, all of them stopping to stare at the human prisoner with hatred in their dark eyes. They brought him to the largest building, the Royal Hive Palace. Inside, the walls were covered with beautiful patterns that seemed to move and shift. Guards stood everywhere, watching him with weapons ready. The throne room was massive. At the far end sat Queen Seraphine. She was magnificent and terrifying. Her shell was deep purple, almost black, decorated with gold. Her eyes held intelligence and power. She had ruled the Korath Empire for over a century and had ordered the deaths of millions of humans. Do-hyun was forced to his knees before her. The queen studied him for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was cold and sharp. A translation device made her words understandable to human ears. "A human healer," she said. "How interesting. I was told your kind only knew how to destroy." Do-hyun looked up at her. He knew he should be afraid. He knew he should beg for his life. But something in him refused to show weakness. "I save lives," he said simply. "That is all I have ever done." The queen's eyes narrowed. For a moment, Do-hyun thought she would order his death right there. But then something changed in her expression. Something that looked almost like hope. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "you can prove that." She gestured, and servants opened the door at the side of the throne room. They carried in a bed, and on that bed lay a young Korath female. She was smaller than the adults, her shell a lighter shade of purple. Her breathing was weak and uneven. Dark spots covered her body, and she shook with fever. "My daughter," the queen said, and for the first time, her voice showed emotion. "Princess Yira. She is dying. A plague has taken hold of her, and none of my healers can stop it. They say she has days left, perhaps only hours." Do-hyun looked at the sick princess. She was just a child. Despite everything, despite the war and the hatred and all the death, she was just a sick child. "I offer you a choice, human," the queen continued. "Heal my daughter, and you will live. Fail, and you will die slowly, in ways your kind cannot imagine." The court erupted in angry voices. The nobles could not believe their queen would let a human touch royal blood. It was unthinkable. It was an insult to their entire species, but the queen silenced them with a single look. Do-hyun stood slowly. He walked to the bed and looked down at the princess. Her eyes opened slightly, filled with pain and fear. She was terrified of him, this strange creature from an enemy world. He reached out and gently touched her forehead, checking her temperature. She flinched but did not pull away. "I will try," Do-hyun said. "Not because you threaten me, but because she is sick, and I am a healer. That is enough reason." The queen watched him with unreadable eyes. She did not understand this human. He faced death, yet he spoke of saving her daughter as if it were simply the obvious thing to do. Perhaps, she thought, there was more to these creatures than she had been taught, or perhaps he would fail, and she would have the pleasure of killing him herself. Either way, for the first time in weeks, Queen Seraphine felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. The royal medical chambers were cold and dark. The Korath preferred it that way, but Do-hyun asked for lights to be brought in, much to the confusion of the servants. He needed to see clearly if he was going to save this girl. Princess Yira lay on the bed, her breathing shallow and weak. The dark spots on her shell had spread since yesterday. She drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes crying out in her own language, calling for her mother. Do-hyun worked without rest. He took samples of her blood, studied the structure of her cells, and ran every test he could think of. The Korath healers watched from a distance, whispering among themselves. They thought he was wasting time. They had already tried everything. The high physician, a tall Korath named Mortek, stood closest. His dislike for Do-hyun was obvious. He had served the royal family for decades, and now a primitive human was doing his job. The insult burned in his chest like fire. "You are foolish to think you can succeed where we have failed," Mortek said. "You know nothing of our biology, nothing of our medicine. You will kill her faster than the plague." Do-hyun did not look up from his work. "Then why hasn't she died already under your care?" Mortek's hands curled into fists, but he said nothing more. The queen had given orders. The human was not to be touched until he either saved the princess or failed. As night fell, Do-hyun activated his neural implant. Sujin's voice filled his mind, reading her old research notes. She had spent years studying alien species, trying to understand how their bodies worked. She had believed that medicine could be a bridge between worlds, a way to build peace instead of war. She had died before she could prove it. But her knowledge remained. Do-hyun listened to her voice and felt tears in his eyes. He missed her so much, but he forced himself to focus. A child's life depended on him. By morning, he had found something. The plague was not natural. It was too perfect, too specific in how it attacked Korath cells. This was a weapon, created in a laboratory somewhere. Someone had made this disease on purpose, but who? And why would they target the princess? He pushed those questions aside for now. First, he needed to create a cure. Using Sujin's research and his own medical knowledge, Do-hyun began mixing compounds. He worked for hours, testing different combinations, adjusting, and trying again. The Korath healers watched with growing confusion. Human medicine was so different from their own. It seemed almost random, yet the human moved with complete confidence. On the second day, Princess Yura's condition grew worse. Her fever spiked dangerously high. The dark spots began to spread to her face. The queen came to visit and stood in silence, watching her daughter slip away. "She is dying," Mortek said, with satisfaction hidden in his voice. "The human has failed. We should end this foolishness and execute him." But Do-hyun ignored him. He had finished the treatment. It was risky. He had never used it on a Korath before, but it was her only chance. He approached the princess's bed. She was barely conscious, her eyes unfocused and glassy. She looked so small, so fragile. He thought of all the Korath children who had died in the war, all the human children too. So much death, so much waste. "I am going to help you," he said softly, knowing she probably could not understand him. "This might hurt, but I need you to be brave. Can you do that for me?" To everyone's surprise, the princess nodded weakly. Do-hyun administered the treatment. Then he did something that shocked every Korath in the room. He sat beside her bed and took her hand. The Korath did not do this. Their medicine was cold and clinical. Patients were treated and left alone. Touch was not part of healing. It was considered unnecessary, even improper. But Do-hyun held her hand and talked to her gently. He told her stories about Earth, about the blue oceans and green forests, about the birds that sang in the morning and the stars that filled the night sky. He told her about his childhood, about learning to ride a bicycle and falling into a pond. He told her about Sujin, about how they met and how she used to laugh at his terrible jokes. The princess listened. Even in her fevered state, she turned toward his voice like a flower turning toward the sun. Hours passed. Mortek waited for the human to fail. He waited for the princess to die so he could watch the execution. But instead, something miraculous happened. The princess's fever began to drop. The dark spots stopped spreading. Her breathing grew stronger, steadier. By evening, she opened her eyes and looked at Do-hyun with confusion, but no longer with fear. The queen rushed to her daughter's side. For the first time, Do-hyun saw emotion break through her cold exterior. She touched her daughter's face with trembling hands. "Mother," Princess Yura whispered. "The human. He saved me." The room fell silent. Mortek's face twisted with rage. This was impossible. A human had succeeded where the greatest Korath healers had failed. It was humiliating beyond words. Later, that night, Do-hyun was resting in a small room they had given him when he heard a sound. He turned to see Mortek standing in the doorway, a blade in his hand. "You should have failed," the high physician hissed. "You should have died. I will not let a human make fools of us all." He lunged forward, but Do-hyun was ready. Years of combat had taught him to sense danger. He dodged the blade and grabbed Mortek's arm, twisting it until the weapon fell to the floor. Guards rushed in at the sound of the struggle. They found the high physician pinned to the ground by the human, the blade lying nearby. The queen arrived moments later. Her eyes took in the scene, and her expression grew cold as ice. "You dare attack someone under my protection?" she said to Mortek. "You dare try to murder the one who saved my daughter?" Mortek began to beg, but the queen silenced him with a gesture. "Take him away. He will face judgment in the morning." As the guards dragged Mortek from the room, the queen turned to Do-hyun. For a long moment, she simply looked at him, as if seeing him for the first time. "You could have killed him," she said finally. "You had every right, but you did not." Do-hyun shrugged, though his hands were still shaking from the encounter. "I am a healer. I do not take lives. I save them." The queen was silent for a moment. Then she did something that would have been unthinkable just days ago. She bowed her head slightly, a gesture of respect. Perhaps, she said quietly, I have much to learn about your kind. She left without another word, but Do-hyun understood. Something had changed. A small crack had appeared in the wall of hatred between their species. It was not much, but it was a beginning. 2 weeks had passed since Do-hyun saved the princess. Her recovery was slow but steady. Each day she grew a little stronger. Each day the fear in her eyes faded a little more. Do-hyun had been given better quarters now. He was no longer a prisoner, not exactly. He was something strange and new, something the Korath had no word for. A human living among them. A former enemy who had saved their princess. Princess Yura asked to see him every day. At first, it was just for medical checkups. But soon, the visits became longer. She was curious about him, this strange creature who had held her hand when she was dying. Why did you save me? She asked one afternoon. Her voice was still weak, but her eyes were bright and intelligent. We are enemies. Your people and mine have been killing each other for longer than I have been alive. Why would you help me? Do-hyun thought carefully before answering. Because you were sick. Because you needed help. That is reason enough. But I am Korath. If I grow up, I will be queen someday. I might order attacks on your worlds. I might kill your people. Or you might not, Do-hyun said with a small smile. The future is not written yet. Right now, you are just a young girl who was very sick. And I am just a healer who did his job. Yura stared at him for a long time. You are strange, she said finally. My teachers told me humans were savage beasts. They said you feel nothing but anger and hunger for destruction. But you are not like that at all. Your teachers were wrong. Just as my teachers were wrong about your people. This seemed to affect Yura deeply. She was quiet for the rest of that day. As the days passed, they talked more and more. Do-hyun taught her simple human games. He showed her how to play a clapping game that children on Earth played, and she laughed at how clumsy his hands looked doing it. She taught him about Korath music, which was made not with instruments, but with vibrations of their shells. It sounded strange to human ears, but there was beauty in it. She showed him Korath art, patterns carved into crystal that changed depending on the light. She explained the stories behind them, tales of heroes and monsters from long before the war with humans began. I have been studying your kind, Yura admitted one evening. In secret. My mother does not know. I found human books and music in our archives, things captured from your ships. I wanted to understand our enemy. And what did you learn? Yura looked down at her hands. I learned that you are not monsters. You create beautiful things. You love your families. You dream of peace just as we do. The war. I do not think either side truly wants it anymore. But we do not know how to stop. Do-hyun nodded sadly. War is easy to start but hard to end. Too much pain on both sides. Too much loss. People become afraid that if they stop fighting, they will look weak. So they keep fighting, even when they have forgotten why they started. My mother lost her brother in the war, Yura said softly. She does not speak of it, but I know she carries that pain. I think it made her hate humans more than she might have otherwise. I lost my wife, Do-hyun replied. Killed in a Korath attack. For a long time, I was angry. I wanted revenge. But then I realized that revenge would not bring her back. It would only create more pain, more loss. She would not have wanted that. She believed medicine could bring peace. I try to honor that belief. Yura reached out and touched his hand. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. Meanwhile, Do-hyun had been investigating the plague. He could not forget that it was a weapon, not a natural disease. Someone had created it. Someone had deliberately tried to kill the princess. Late at night, He studied the plague structure on a small computer the Queen had allowed him to use. The more he looked, the more he became certain. This was not Korath work. It was not human work either. The technology was different, older somehow. The Syndicate. He had heard rumors about them during the war. A shadowy organization that sold weapons to both sides. They did not care who won or lost. They only cared about profit. And a war between two great empires was very profitable indeed. If the princess died, the Queen would be consumed by grief and rage. She would order new attacks on human worlds. The humans would respond in kind. The war would grow bigger, deadlier, and the Syndicate would sell more weapons. Do-hyun needed to tell someone. But who would believe him? A human, accusing some mysterious organization of manipulating the war. It sounded like madness. Before he could decide what to do, danger found him first. It was late evening. Yura had asked Do-hyun to walk with her in the palace gardens. She was strong enough now to move around, though she still tired easily. The gardens were beautiful, filled with plants that glowed softly in the darkness. They were alone when Prince Vorath appeared. He was the Queen's nephew, next in line for the throne if anything happened to Yura. Do-hyun had seen him watching them with cold eyes. He had heard whispers that Vorath was ambitious, that he dreamed of being king. What a touching scene, Vorath said, his voice dripping with contempt. The princess and her human pet. You disgust me, Yura, befriending this creature. Have you no pride? Leave us alone, Vorath, Yura said, but her voice trembled. I think not. Vorath drew a blade, its edge gleaming in the garden's light. The plague should have killed you. I made sure of that. But this human ruined everything. No matter. I will finish what the plague could not. Yura gasped. You? You created the plague? I paid for it. The Syndicate was happy to help, for the right price. With you dead and your mother broken by grief, the throne would be mine. But you just would not die, would you? He lunged at Yura, the blade aimed at her heart. Do-hyun moved without thinking. He threw himself between them, feeling the blade slice into his side. Pain exploded through his body, but he did not fall. He grabbed Vorath's arm and twisted, throwing him to the ground. Guards came running at the sound of the struggle. They found Vorath on the ground, and Do-hyun standing over him, blood pouring from his wound, still protecting the princess. The Queen arrived within minutes. Her eyes went wide when she saw Do-hyun's injury, the blood spreading across his shirt. He saved me, Yura cried, tears streaming down her face. Vorath tried to kill me. He created the plague. He admitted everything. And the human? He took the blade from me. Mother, he took the blade from me. The Queen looked at Do-hyun. He was pale, swaying on his feet, but he had not moved from his protective position in front of her daughter. Why? She whispered. Why would you risk your life for her? Do-hyun smiled weakly. I told you. I am a healer. I protect the life. All life. Even if it costs me my own. Then his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed to the ground. Yura screamed his name. The Queen stood frozen, watching the human who had saved her daughter not once but twice. His blood soaking into the soil of her garden. For the first time in decades, she did not know what to believe anymore. Do-hyun drifted in darkness. He heard voices, sometimes speaking words he understood, sometimes speaking the strange clicking language of the Korath. He felt hands touching him, treating his wound. He felt pain, then nothing at all. He dreamed of Sujin. She stood in a field of flowers, smiling at him with that smile he loved so much. You did well, she said. You saved her. I do not know if I will survive this, he admitted. You will. You have more work to do. The war is not over yet, but you have planted a seed. Now watch it grow. When he woke, he was in a soft bed in a beautiful room. Sunlight streamed through windows made of crystal. For a moment, he thought he was back on Earth. Then he saw Yira sitting beside him, her large dark eyes watching him with worry. "You are awake," she said, relief flooding her voice. "I was so scared. You almost died." "Almost is not dead," Do-hyun said weakly. "How long was I unconscious?" 5 days. Our healers treated you. They said they learned much from watching your methods when you saved me. They used some of your techniques. I think they respect you now." Do-hyun tried to sit up. The pain shot through his side. He fell back onto the pillow with a groan. "Rest," Yira said firmly. "Mother's orders. She said you are now a protected member of the royal household. Anyone who harms you will face her personally." "Your mother said that? About a human?" Yira nodded, a small smile on her face. "Things are changing, Do-hyun, because of you." Over the next few days, Do-hyun recovered slowly. Yira visited him constantly, sometimes reading to him from AudioBooks, sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence. The Queen came once, standing stiffly at the foot of his bed. "You saved my daughter twice," she said. "I do not know how to repay such a debt." "I do not want payment," Do-hyun replied. "I want the truth to be known." Vorath admitted he worked with the Syndicate. They created the plague. They have been manipulating this war for years, profiting from death on both sides. The Queen's eyes hardened. "We are investigating. Vorath is imprisoned. He has told us much, trying to save his own life. What he reveals, it is disturbing. The Syndicate does not want peace," Do-hyun said. "They want war forever. They sell weapons to both sides. They create conflicts where none exist. If your people and mine ever stopped fighting, they would lose everything. Then we must stop fighting," the Queen said quietly. "If only to destroy those who have manipulated us." Those words, from the mouth of the Korath Queen herself, were more shocking than anything that had happened before. When Do-hyun was strong enough to walk, he and Yira presented their evidence to the High Council. They had documents from Vorath's files, communications with the Syndicate, records of payments and plague shipments. The evidence was overwhelming that the Council erupted in chaos. Some refused to believe it. They accused the human of planting lies, of manipulating their princess. But others listened. They remembered how the war had dragged on for decades, how neither side ever seemed to win a decisive victory, how it almost seemed as if someone wanted the fighting to continue forever. The Queen silenced them all with a raised hand. "We have been fools," she said, her voice heavy with anger and shame. "We have been fighting the wrong enemy. While we killed humans and they killed us, the real enemy watched and grew rich on our blood." She turned to Do-hyun. "Human, you have contacts among your people. I need to speak with your leaders." "They will not trust you," Do-hyun warned. 40 years of war cannot be forgotten in a day. "Then help me convince them. You have shown me that humans can be more than what we believed. Help me show them that Korath can be the same." It was the most difficult thing Do-hyun had ever done. Using the palace's communication systems, he sent a message to the Human Confederation. It took hours for a response. When it came, the face on the screen was Admiral Choi Sung-yoon, commander of the human fleet. He looked tired. His hair had gone gray from years of war. When he saw Do-hyun, his eyes widened with shock. "Park Do-hyun? We thought you were dead. Your shuttle went down months ago." "We assumed. I survived, Admiral. I have much to tell you." Do-hyun explained everything. The plague, the princess, the Syndicate's manipulation. At first, Sung-yoon looked skeptical. But when the Queen herself appeared on screen and confirmed every word, his expression changed. "This is unprecedented," the Admiral said slowly. "You are asking for a ceasefire? After everything?" "I am asking for more than that," the Queen replied. "I am asking for peace, real peace. The Syndicate has played us against each other for too long. They are the true enemy. I am proposing we work together to destroy them." The admiral was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly he nodded. "I will need to consult with my government, but I can agree to a temporary ceasefire while we discuss terms. If what you say about the syndicate is true, then we have all been fools." The connection ended, and Do-yoon felt a weight lift from his shoulders. It was not over. There would be difficult negotiations ahead, decades of hatred to overcome. But a door had opened that had been sealed for 40 years. That night, Commander Yoon Tai-woo arrived with a small rescue team. He was Do-yoon's former squad leader, a man who had searched for months after his shuttle went down. "I cannot believe you are alive," Tai-woo said, embracing Do-yoon carefully to avoid his wound. "And I really cannot believe where I found you. Living in the Korath Palace. What happened to you?" "A long story," Do-yoon said with a tired smile. "But I am not leaving. Not yet. Not until this is finished." Tai-woo stared at him. "You want to stay? Here? Among them?" "I want to see peace, Tai-woo. Real peace. These people are not monsters. They are just like us. Scared, angry, manipulated. They want the same things we want. Safety for their families. A future for their children. I can help build a bridge between our worlds. I have to try." Tai-woo looked at the queen, who stood nearby, watching them. He looked at Princess Yura, who stood at Do-yoon's side like a protective shadow. He saw something he never expected to see in Korath: respect, maybe even affection. "You always were the stubborn one," Tai-woo said finally. "All right, I will stay too. Someone needs to watch your back." Before any peace could be finalized, the syndicate struck. They had learned of the proposed alliance and were desperate to stop it. Ships appeared in orbit around the Korath homeworld, unmarked vessels carrying weapons of terrible power. "They mean to destroy us both," the queen realized. "If Korath and humans are seen dying together, each side will blame the other. The war will restart, worse than ever. Then we fight together," Do-yoon said. "Show the galaxy that we are no longer enemies." For the first time in history, human and Korath ships flew side by side. The battle was fierce, but the syndicate had not expected united resistance. They had grown used to their victims fighting each other instead of them. When it was over, the syndicate fleet was destroyed. And across both empires, people watched in amazement as human and Korath soldiers celebrated together. A new era had begun. 1 year had passed since the battle against the syndicate. The Treaty of Valora Prime was signed on a clear morning, with the purple sky stretching endlessly overhead. Representatives from both species gathered in the great plaza outside the Royal Hive Palace. Human diplomats stood beside Korath nobles. Soldiers who had once tried to kill each other now shook hands and bowed in the Korath way. Do-hyun watched from the crowd. He was wearing clean clothes for once, not the worn uniform of a combat medic. Beside him stood Tai-woo, who had kept his promise to watch his friends back through all the difficult months of negotiation. "I still cannot believe this is happening," Tai-woo murmured. "After everything. After all the death." "Belief is not required," Do-hyun replied. "Only action. People chose to stop fighting. That is what matters." Princess Yura stood on the platform beside her mother. She had grown over the past year, not just physically, but in spirit. The sickness was long behind her now. She carried herself with confidence, a young woman ready to help lead her people into a new era. She caught Do-hyun's eye and smiled. He smiled back. The queen stepped forward to address the crowd. Her voice carried across the plaza, translated for all to understand. "For 40 years, we have been at war. For 40 years, we have buried our children and mourned our dead. We told ourselves it was necessary. We told ourselves the enemy was evil and had to be destroyed. We were wrong." She paused, letting the words sink in. We were manipulated by those who profited from our pain. The syndicate fed us lies, and we believed them. They told us humans were monsters, and we did not question it. They told humans we were monsters, and they did not question it either. The queen turned and looked directly at Do-yoon. One human showed me the truth. A healer, stranded in enemy territory, who saved my daughter's life not once but twice. He had every reason to hate us. We had killed his wife. We had tried to kill him. But when my daughter lay dying, he did not hesitate. He did not demand anything in return. He simply helped because helping was the right thing to do. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Many of them knew the story by now, but hearing it from the queen herself was different. We believed humans were primitive creatures, driven only by violence and destruction. We were wrong. Their ferocity comes not from cruelty, but from love. They are fierce because they care so deeply about protecting those they love. This human did not fight for glory or conquest. He fought for a sick child he had never met. He fought for peace. He fought because he could not stand to watch suffering and do nothing. The queen extended her hand toward Do-yoon. Park Do-yoon of Earth, please come forward. The crowd parted as Do-yoon walked to the platform. He climbed the steps, suddenly very aware of how many eyes were watching him. Human eyes and Korath eyes alike, all fixed on one ordinary medic. The queen took his hand, a gesture that would have been unthinkable a year ago. Korath royalty did not touch outsiders. But so much had changed. On behalf of the Korath Empire, I thank you, she said. You saved my daughter. You saved our people from the lies that enslaved us. You showed us what humans truly are. She turned to face the crowd again. Today, I do not just sign a treaty. I declare Park Do-hyun to be a friend of the Korath Empire, now and forever. His name will be remembered in our histories. His story will be taught to our children. When they ask how the Great War ended, we will tell them it ended because one human refused to let hate win. The crowd erupted in applause, both human and Korath together. The sound was deafening, but Do-yoon barely heard it. His eyes were filled with tears. After the ceremony, he slipped away to a quiet garden at the edge of the palace grounds. He needed a moment alone. He found a bench beneath a tree with silver leaves and sat down heavily. His hands were shaking. It was all too much. The ceremony, the praise, the weight of everything that had happened. You do not like being famous, do you? He looked up to see Yira approaching. She sat beside him without waiting for an invitation, just as she always did now. I did not do anything special, Do-yoon said. I just did what any healer would do. That is not true, Yira replied firmly. Many healers would have let me die. They would have seen an enemy child and walked away. You saw a patient. You saw a person. That is special, even if you do not believe it. Do-hyun was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small data chip. This contains my wife's research, he said. She believed medicine could bring peace. She spent her whole life working toward that dream. She died before she could see it happen, but her knowledge saved you. And saving you changed everything. He looked at the chip, then at Yira. I want you to have it. Her research, her notes, everything. Continue her work. Use it to help your people and mine understand each other better. Build a bridge between our worlds, the way she always dreamed. Yura took the chip carefully, as if it were the most precious thing in the universe. I will. I promise. They sat together in comfortable silence as the sun moved across the purple sky. Later that day, Do-hyun visited a memorial that had been built on the palace grounds. It was small and simple, just a stone with names carved into it. Names of those who had died in the war, both human and Korath. Sujin's name was there now, added at Do-hyun's request. He touched the carved letters gently. I did it, he whispered. I finished what you started. The war is over. Your research saved a princess and changed everything. I hope you are proud of me." The wind rustled through the silver trees, almost like an answer. Months later, Do-hyun stood in a classroom on the Korath homeworld. Around him sat children, some human and some Korath, all mixed together. They looked at him with curious eyes. "Today," he said, "I am going to teach you about medicine. Not human medicine or Korath medicine. Just medicine. The science of healing, of helping others, of making the universe a little better than we found it." A young Korath raised her hand. "Is it true you saved the princess?" Do-hyun smiled. "She saved herself. I just helped a little." "But you were enemies?" a human boy said, confused. "Why would you help an enemy?" Do-hyun looked at the class. These children, who would grow up in a peaceful galaxy. They would never know the horrors of the war, the endless death and hatred. They would only know that once humans and Korath had been enemies, and now they were friends. "Because there is no such thing as an enemy when someone is hurt," he said. "There is only a person who needs help. If you remember nothing else from my class, remember that. It does not matter what someone looks like, where they come from, or what language they speak. If they are suffering, you help them. That is what it means to be a healer." From the doorway, Princess Yuro watched. She was no longer a patient or even just a friend. She was his partner in building this new future. An ambassador for peace. Between their peoples, she caught his eye and smiled. The galaxy had always believed that humanity's greatest weapons were their ships and their soldiers, their technology and their tactics. But the Korath learned the truth that day, a truth that would be passed down through generations. Humanity's greatest weapon was something far more dangerous. It was their stubborn, irrational, beautiful refusal to let anyone die alone. And that weapon had won a war without firing a single shot.